Hello and welcome to my tutorial on how to solve the Rubik's Cube. A lot of people on their first attempts at trying to solve it seem to solve it face by face, which in fact is actually very hard to do. Instead, you could go for a much easier way, which is layer by layer. A lot of cubers out there actually use a method to actually do this sort of thing, which is layer by layer, and what they do is they use something called the Fridrich method. Now, the Fridrich method is technically divided down into three versions. The beginner's version is first, which technically just gets you started off with actually simple moves to solve the Rubik's Cube, 8 different stages from start to finish, and it just helps you get a good start with the Rubik's Cube. Then there's the intermediate method, which then pushes you a little bit more, but you'll find it quite easy once you understand the beginners. Plus it can kind of get you better times by a bit, but it's still worth it. And then there's the advanced method, which has a lot of different parts in it. So basically you'll be going through a lot with the advanced, but once you understand the whole thing of the advanced, your times will be just really fast. Well, really low, basically, because low times are actually a good thing. Now, in this tutorial, I will be doing the beginner's version, because as I said, it's very easy, and anyone will really learn the beginner's method first. I would really recommend it first. So, in the beginner's version, there's 8 stages. First of all, the first stage is just getting to know your Rubik's Cube. The second stage is sort of solving the cross and so on and so on. Now, I will be giving a further description in solving the stages in a short while. Okay, so I'm actually just going to show you them right now. Okay. First stage, which is stage 1, we are just going to get to know the Rubik's Cube. So the different moves and the different pieces. Alright? Now, it's just useful information to know about the pieces, but vital information for the moves, because they will come up, and I will be explaining more about them in the later stages. Okay, so in this stage, stage 2, we are going to form the cross. And what I mean by this is that the 4 edges that are on the top layer that we're going to start working with, that we're going to find the 4 edges that actually go into there. So in this case I have white on top, so I get the 4 white edges and place them in their correct positions and their correct flip. So all the whites are adjacent to the white center, and all the colours on the side are adjacent to their centers. Okay, so in this stage, stage 3, what we're going to do is we're going to get the corners that need to go into the top layer into position. So just like the edges, correct position and correct flip. Right? Okay, so in this stage, stage 4, we are going to get the edges in the middle layer solved, as you can see. So the colours on those edges have to go between the centres of the same colour. Okay, so in this stage, stage 5, we are going to be making the cross on the opposite side of the cube. So just like the bottom here, where we got the edges into this layer, we are going to in some way do the same thing here. So we're just going to get the yellows facing on top. In this stage, stage 6, what we are going to do is we're going to get the 4 corners that need to go onto the top layer solved, but not 100% solved, because as you can see, not all of these colours around here are lined up correctly, but we will solve these we will correct all this in the last 2. So that's all that shows up at this stage, just getting the entire yellow face completed, not worrying about the sides on the top layer. In this stage, stage 7, what's going to happen is that now that we have the entire yellow face, we're now going to start worrying about the layer, the side layer really, the sides on the top layer. And mainly, in stage 7, the corners. So all that's left to worry about by the time this stage is completed is the edges on the top layer. And in this stage, the final stage, stage 8, as you can see, we will finally solve the edges. So the edges will be correctly solved. And not only that, but your entire cube will be solved. So hopefully that all these different descriptions of the stages will actually help you with actually knowing what's going to come up in each stage. So now we're going to move on to stage 1 of the actual work.
Okay, so in this stage, stage 1, as I said, we're just going to get to know the Rubik's Cube. So as I have said, just the pieces and the moves. So just going to get started with the pieces. Okay, so the pieces. As you can see, there are 3 different types: the corners, edges, and the center. These each have kind of very similar properties, but there's a slight difference between them. First of all, the corners, they have 3 colors on them, so they cover 3 faces. It's also one of the movable pieces, as it's kind of obvious of that. Edges, they have 2 colors, so cover 2 faces, just like the corners, they are movable. The centers, they have 1 color, and they are on 1 face at any one time, and they are the only immovable pieces. Now, you may wonder why. Well, if you think about it, each of these centers are connected to each other. This one is connected to this one by an axis inside, as this one, and the last 2, so the green and the blue. So the axes inside are intersecting at the very center of the Rubik's Cube, and that is technically why the centers don't actually move at all. Another interesting thing is that you may want to get used to knowing what colors are opposite each other, because it is very useful to know in stage 2 when you're solving the cross. Now, these colors that are opposite each other are red and orange, yellow and white, blue and green. Now, if your cube does have a slightly different color theme, or the colors seem to be different in a little bit, like just by a little bit, you'll just have to learn off that way. But I'd say a majority of the Rubik's Cubes out there would have it like this style. Right? Okay, so now we're going to talk a bit about the moves. Now, in the different stages, we're going to be having to put these moves that we make into a sequence. Now, these sequence of moves are also known as algorithms, and algorithms help us get from an unsolved state to a solved state. So, for example, so here we have a case where there is only 3 incorrect edges. Right, so as you can see that these kind of would go in this direction. Now, I will be explaining this sort of stuff in stage 8, but for example, here what I do is I'd be able to recognize the case that it is and say, okay, so this case has this algorithm for this case to be solved. Slightly complicated the way I said it, but anyway. And I would just remember the sequence of moves I need to make. And done. Okay, so hopefully you have some sort of an idea what an algorithm is now, if you haven't known by this stage. Now, in algorithms, you won't see stuff such as turn the right face 180 degrees, then turn the top face 90 degrees to the right. You won't see any of that stuff. That will just bore you to complete boredom, basically. Bore you to boredom, pretty much. So that's how it would get. So, instead of that, we'd come across notations. Now, notations would be telling us to make certain moves using letters. Now, letters such as these ones, U, or L, D, F, and B, they will tell us what moves to make. Now, each of these will be assigned to a certain face of the Rubik's Cube. So, for example, or, that would be the right face, right here. So, that one. Then, U will be the top one over up here. L over here. D is at the bottom. F is the front, so, and then B is at the back. Okay, so, for example, U is the up face, D is the down face, OR is the right face, L is the left face, and F is the front face, and the B is the back face. Now, what direction will we move these according to these notations? In fact, clockwise. Now, each of these notations will tell us to move it 90 degrees in that direction, so clockwise. So, for example, if I saw in a notation the letter OR, I would know to just do that move, since it's 90 degrees clockwise with the right face. So, if you just keep on giving this move a go, you should eventually get that. Now, next we have L. L is the left face, so we're going to be turning the left face clockwise, just like so. Okay, so now at this stage you should actually notice that OR and L seem to go in opposite directions. Just get used to that, because if you do get confused by that, it will just clear up a lot. So just remember, moves that you see on this side that don't have anything else with it, that they go in opposite directions. Now, as well, there's F. So F is like so. B is this way. U, like so. And D. Now, as well, like algorithms will tell us to do a move in a different direction. Now, we won't see things like OR, and OR, like 3 ORs in a row, telling us to make this amount of moves. So as you can see, we're just pretty much doing this. There's actually a slightly different way. In fact, in the way that algorithms tell us is that they have an apostrophe after it. Sometimes you might see an I, but very commonly there's an apostrophe. This apostrophe is known as prime. When we see a letter followed by this apostrophe, we can think of, like, say, OR prime or U prime, anything like that. So this time we move it in the other direction. So OR prime, like so. So as you can see, this time OR prime is going in the same direction as L. So you can kind of get used to that in one way or another. So OR prime, then L prime is like this. Then there's U prime, D prime, then F prime, and B prime. Okay, now as well as that, there's also things called half turns. Now these won't be like or even or prime, or UI, so on. In fact, there's another way of saying that, simply by putting the letter 2 after it. So if we see something like or 2, just turn that face 180 degrees. Alright, so or 2 is giving this an entire turn. L2, U2, like the band, but not trying to be too funny on this case. Then D2, F2, and B2. Well, don't know why I just did that. Never mind. Okay, so hopefully you have some sort of an idea about these notations. Okay, so just keep on practicing those until you get an extreme good hang of it. If you have any problems, just leave a comment and just try and ask away. Just don't hesitate to ask any questions if you ever get stuck. So just leave a comment, as I said, and I'll try and get back to you as soon as possible. Okay, so by the end of this stage, you should have a good fair idea about the Rubik's Cube. So just keep on practicing the moves for the algorithms, so that eventually you will actually be able to solve a Rubik's Cube from start to finish. So just keep on practicing the moves, as I said, and you'll eventually get there. Next, stage 2. Okay, so in stage 2, we're going to solve the cross. In my opinion, the cross is actually one of the most intuitive stages of all of them. Plus, you don't really need to know any algorithms to solve the edges. Now, the first thing you want to do is you want to pick a color and have it on the top face. So in my case, I'm going to go for white. Next, you have to search around the cube for the 4 edges that contain this color. So we have one here, and one on the back, one on the bottom, yeah, and one in the middle layer over here. Okay, so now that we've found these pieces, we want to put them into their correct locations. Here, we have the white on this edge lined up with the white center, but this here is not lined up with this correct center. So in order to fix this one, which is half solved, because of the 2 whites lined up, we are just going to rotate the top face until the center does line up. Okay, so that's one solved piece. Here we have the one that's in the middle layer, the white-green edge. Now, if it's in the middle layer, choose a color that's not white, so obviously green, and we're going to rotate that face that the green is lined up with to the bottom, so they have white opposite yellow. Next, line this color here up with its center, just like that. Okay. Now, as you may know, because white is opposite yellow, we can rotate the entire face 180 degrees. So now that edge is solved. We can do this one next, so the same thing. The blue is a non-white color, and it's lined up with the green. Move the green down. Move the blue all the way around, so the blue is lined up. However, this face previously had a solved edge, so we're going to make that back to solved. Okay. Over here, as you can see, white is opposite yellow. We're going to rotate that up. Now, obviously, you've seen a good few of these middle layer ones, so I'm just going to change this type. Okay, so now this type is where it's on the bottom layer. Okay, so you line it up with its center if the white is on the bottom, and then rotate it up. But what if the piece is flipped, such as so? Okay, so this time it's flipped. First of all, put it to one of the faces adjacent to it, like so. Next, align the red up with its center. Then align the white up with the white center. Because you move this edge piece out of the way, move it back up. So there you have solved the cross. Now one other thing, what if there's an edge piece on the top and it was either half solved, like in a good position, somewhat relative. I'll just show you what I mean. So something like this, where we have white and blue, and the edge piece is in the correct position, but in this wrong flip. What we do is you can technically, if you want, move it down to the bottom and do the moves that will get it correctly, or you can move this over so it's on the side, bring it down so the blue's lined up, undo the move you made on the top, and line it up. Okay, so just solve the rest. Sorry, I'm taking so long. Okay, so after maybe a couple of minutes or there or so, as you can see now, the cross is solved. So, as you may know also, a lot of people that when they're first doing the cross, sometimes they might not get these colours lined up correctly, which is actually vital. So just get them into their correct positions and the correct flip. So as you can see, the cross solved there, and as I showed you in the descriptive stage, or the description of the stages, sorry, that these colours here are lined up correctly. Okay, so just keep on practicing the cross and you'll eventually get there. Okay, so on to stage 3.